By lunchtime, everyone at Briar Glen High had already decided the new boy was dangerous. Nia Bennett heard it 3 times before she even saw him. The first whisper came in chemistry, breathed over the hiss of a Bunsen burner. The second followed her through the hall between classes, all sharp excitement and fake fear. The third came from a pair of girls leaning against the trophy case who lowered their voices just enough to make sure everyone still heard. He got transferred here after a fire. No, after a fight. My cousin says he put someone in the hospital. Nia kept walking, hugging her books tighter against her chest. People always sounded thrilled when danger happened to someone else. The hallway lights buzzed overhead, throwing pale squares across the waxed floor. Lockers slammed, laughter ricocheted. Somewhere, someone shouted for a basketball. It was the same school she had walked through every day for 3 years. Same chipped blue paint, same banners, same smell of industrial cleaner and cafeteria fries. But that morning it felt tilted, as if the whole building had leaned toward one new gravity. Nia hated that she noticed it. She hated even more that part of her understood it. She knew what it was like when a room decided who mattered before you ever spoke, knew how fast stories formed around people, knew how hard it was to pry yourself loose once everyone agreed on a version of you. Quiet girl, scholarship girl, the one from the edge of town, pretty enough to notice, invisible enough to ignore, easy to overlook, easier to underestimate. She had built her life out of staying small in places that rewarded sharp elbows and louder voices. So when she rounded the corner by the east wing and saw the crowd gathered in a loose half circle, she almost turned the other way. Almost. Then the students shifted, and she saw him. He stood beside the principal's office door like he had stepped out of the wrong story. Tall, dark-haired, too still. Most boys at Briar Glen slouched or sprawled or moved with the restless carelessness of people who had never had to think about the space they took up. This one stood with a kind of controlled looseness, shoulders relaxed, hands at his sides, expression unreadable. A black leather jacket hung open over a dark shirt. At his throat rested a pendant, the color of live ember, glowing faintly against his skin as if it had trapped a coal inside crystal. Nia's breath caught, not because he was handsome, though he was, painfully so, in a way that made the watching girls go soft and giggly around the edges. It was his eyes. They burned, not metaphorically, not in the dramatic poetry way English teachers liked. They held an impossible inner light, gold orange at the center, like banked fire behind a human shape. Not enough to cast shadows. Enough that she knew she wasn't imagining it. Her fingers tightened around her book so hard the corner dug into her palm. No one else seemed to be screaming. No one else seemed to be running. 2 girls near the office whispered behind manicured fingers, thrilled and scandalized. A freshman boy stared openly. Vice Principal Holloway stood at the office door with the brittle smile of a man pretending everything was normal. So either no one else could see it, or they could. And Nia had just wandered into the sort of secret that split your life into before and after. The boy turned his head. His gaze locked on hers through the crowd. The hallway noise blurred at the edges. Nia had the absurd, dizzying sensation of being found. Not noticed, not glanced at. Found. Her pulse skipped so hard it hurt. Heat rushed up her throat. She should have looked away. Any reasonable person would have. But she couldn't. Something in his stare held her there, not forcefully, not cruelly, but with an intensity that made the air feel thinner. His expression changed, only slightly. Just the smallest narrowing of his eyes, as if he had expected something and had just been proved right. Then Vice Principal Holloway stepped between them. The spell broke. Sound crashed back in. The locker slam, the laughter, sneakers squeaking on tile. Nia sucked in a breath like she'd been underwater. "Move along!" Holloway snapped to the students. "Show's over." The crowd dispersed in the disappointed, dragging way crowds always did. Nia forced her feet forward before anyone could notice she'd frozen in the middle of the hall. She was nearly past when a voice said, low and smooth, "You can see it." She stopped. Every muscle in her body went tight. Slowly, she turned. The new boy was watching her again. Up close, the glow in his eyes was harder to dismiss. His face was all sharp grace and controlled danger, too beautiful to be safe. Ash-dark hair fell over his forehead. A faint scent reached her, strange and warm, like cedarwood and smoke after rain. "I don't know what you're talking about," Nia said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Years of practice. One corner of his mouth tipped upward, but there was no humor in it. That was fast. "I have class." "So do I." "Then maybe you should go." The vice principal reappeared with a folder and a strained expression. "Mr. Vale, you'll be with Miss Dorian in second period. She's expecting you." Mr. Vale. The name fit him too well, too smooth, too deliberate, like it had been chosen to pass inspection. He didn't take his eyes off Nia as he accepted the schedule. "I'm sure she is." A warning prickled down Nia's spine. It wasn't about what he said. It was the way he said it, softly, like a secret only she was meant to hear. She walked away before she could do something stupid, like ask what he meant. Halfway down the hall, she realized her hands were shaking. By last period, she had almost convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing. Almost. Then the fire alarm went off. Students groaned as the shrill bell split the air. Chairs scraped, papers fluttered. Ms. Dorian rolled her eyes and told everyone to leave their bags. "Probably another prank," someone muttered. Nia stood, pulse jumping. Across the room, the empty desk in the back corner, the one assigned to the new boy that morning, remained empty. He had never shown up. The hallway turned chaotic in seconds, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder toward the exits. The alarm drilled through her skull. Outside, the November air slapped cold against her skin, but even there, something felt wrong. There was smoke, not much, just enough that it curled above the science wing in a thin gray thread. Teachers began counting students. Everyone complained about the cold. Phones came out. Half the school looked delighted at the interruption. Nia wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself and stared at the building. The smoke thickened. Her stomach dropped. That wasn't prank smoke. It was real. A teacher swore under his breath and started moving students farther back. Another ran toward the side entrance. The principal barked into a radio. Around Nia, the crowd shifted from bored to eager to uneasy. Then she saw him. Mr. Vale stood at the far edge of the lawn, away from the teachers and students, hands in his jacket pockets, face turned toward the science wing. Wind pushed his dark hair off his forehead. The ember pendant at his throat glowed brighter now, a fierce pulse beneath the gray daylight. Nia should not have gone to him. Later, she would know that with humiliating clarity. But fear and curiosity had always felt too much alike inside her body, both quickening her pulse, both tightening her skin, both whispering move. So she crossed the grass. He heard her coming before she spoke. "Did you do that?" she asked. He looked at her. His eyes were brighter than before, molten at the edges. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you think I'm the kind of person who burns down schools." Nia glanced toward the smoke, her heart hammered. "Are you?" A strange expression crossed his face then. Not offense, not amusement, something almost weary. "I'm the kind of person," he said quietly, "who gets blamed when fire appears." The answer should have eased her. It didn't. "You said I could see it." "You can." "See what?" His gaze dropped briefly to the pendant at his throat. "Things other people miss." The wind shifted. Heat brushed her cheek. Nia turned sharply. Orange flicker flashed in a second-floor science window. Not smoke, flame. Students started shouting. Teachers herded them farther back. Somewhere, a siren wailed in the distance. Mr. Vale swore under his breath. The fire surged unnaturally fast, licking across the inside of the windows like something alive and hungry. Nia stumbled back a step. The heat was stronger now, strong enough from this distance to warm her face. Then she saw a shape pounding at the glass. A person. "Oh my God!" Her voice broke. "Someone's in there!" He was already moving. He crossed the grass in 3 strides before Nia's body caught up with her mind. Teachers were yelling, students crying out, but he didn't slow. He reached the side doors just as a burst of flame blew through the cracked frame from inside. People screamed. He lifted one hand. The fire hesitated, not like a draft changed, not like oxygen failed. It recoiled. Nia stopped dead, terror locking every joint in her body. She saw it clearly now, saw the flames bend away from him as if they recognized him, saw the ember at his throat blaze white-hot, saw heat ripple around his body in shimmering waves. His eyes flared like twin furnaces. He was not human. The knowledge hit her with a sickening, world-splitting certainty. He vanished into the burning wing. For 1 second, the world held still. Then everything erupted. Teachers shouted into radios. Students pressed closer despite orders to back away. A window shattered above with a scream of glass. Nia could not breathe. Every thought in her head came loose from its anchor. Not human, not possible, not human. Her chest hurt. She dug her nails into her palms hard enough to sting, grounding herself in pain. A minute passed, then another. The sirens grew louder. And Nia, who had spent most of her life surviving by staying out of the center of things, realized with numb horror that she was watching for one impossible boy to come back out of the flames. The doors burst open. He emerged, carrying Coach Dempsey over one shoulder as if the full-grown man weighed nothing. Fire streamed behind him in fierce ribbons, but none of it touched him. Students gasped and shouted. A teacher ran forward. He handed the unconscious coach over without ceremony, and then his knees buckled. Nia moved before she thought. She reached him just as he caught himself on one hand against the concrete. Heat slammed into her, not enough to burn, enough to feel dangerous. Up close, he looked strained for the first time, jaw tight, breath rough. "You're hurt," she said. "I'm not. You can barely stand." He lifted his head and looked straight at her. For an instant, the fire in his eyes dimmed, revealing something rawer beneath. Pain, yes, but also surprise. As if of all the people surrounding them, he had not expected her to be the one kneeling at his side. "Why did you come over here?" he asked. The question was so strange that she almost laughed. "Because you ran into a fire." His mouth twitched. "That's not usually enough." "For who?" she almost said. Instead, she swallowed and shook her head. "What are you?" Around them, the chaos went strangely muffled. The sirens, the shouting, the running feet all seemed to recede under the weight of his silence. When he answered, his voice was low enough that only she could hear. "That," he said, "is exactly the question that will get you killed." Nia's skin went cold despite the heat pouring off him. Before she could ask another word, a sharp pain split across the center of her chest. She gasped. Light burst under her skin, gold, sudden, bright. He went still. Nia looked down in horror. Through the fabric of her sweater, just beneath her collarbone, something was glowing back. A mark. A shape she had never seen before and somehow recognized instantly, as if it had been sleeping inside her all her life. Around them, the fire roared higher. He caught her wrist with a grip both burning and careful. His voice dropped to a whisper, edged with something that sounded dangerously close to fear. "No," he said. "They found you too soon." Her heart lurched. They. But before she could speak, the second-floor windows exploded outward in a storm of glass and flame, and somewhere inside the fire, something screamed that did not sound human. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the mark beneath Nia's sweater had faded to a dull ache. No one else had seen it, or if they had, they were too busy screaming about the school fire, Coach Dempsey, or the fact that the mysterious new boy had somehow survived charging into an inferno with no burns and no visible panic. Rumors multiplied before the fire was out. By evening, he was a hero, a freak, an arsonist, a secret athlete, a transfer from some private school, and, according to Sloane Mercer, obviously the type to have killed a man. Nia sat at the kitchen table doing homework while her stepmother, Denise, talked over a cooking show and her father answered work emails on his phone. No one asked how her day had gone. When she finally said, "Our science wing caught fire," Denise just blinked and said, "Was anyone hurt?" Coach Dempsey almost died. "That's terrible," Denise said, not looking up from her plate. "Did they cancel school tomorrow?" Nia looked down at her open notebook so no one would see the hurt on her face. The mark throbbed faintly at her chest. Her skin still remembered heat. So did her thoughts. Not human. They found you too soon. At 2 a.m, she woke gasping from a dream of black trees, silver fog, and wings burning against a starless sky. He was waiting for her in the dream, with embers in his eyes and ash on his shoulders. He stood before a ruined throne carved from obsidian roots. When he held out his hand, she saw a ring of red gold light circle both their wrists. "Mine," said a voice she felt more than heard. Nia woke with her heart racing and her sheets twisted around her legs. The room smelled faintly of smoke. On Monday, Briar Glen reopened everything except the scorched science wing. Nia was at her locker when Sloane glided up with 2 friends and a smile so polished it looked rehearsed. "You know," Sloane said, glancing at Nia's sweater, "people are saying the new boy dragged Coach out one-handed. People are also saying he set the fire with his mind," said one of her friends. Sloane tilted her head. "You should be careful, Nia. Weird girls attract weird boys." Nia shut her locker harder than she meant to. "Thanks. I'll add that to my safety plan." One of the girls laughed despite herself. Sloane's mouth tightened. Nia stepped around them, pulse jumping, pleased by the tiny hit she'd landed. Witty in her head was easy. Saying it out loud still felt like stepping onto cracked ice. Then she turned the corner and found him leaning against the wall outside first period. The hall was full of people. Somehow the space around him still felt separate. Girls kept glancing over. Boys kept pretending not to. He wore the same black jacket, the same dark shirt, the same ember pendant. Today his eyes looked human at first glance, gray-green in the fluorescent light. But Nia knew better now, knew the fire lived underneath. He watched her like he had been waiting, which horrifyingly, he probably had. "Did you start haunting hallways professionally?" she asked. "Or is this a hobby?" His mouth curved. That almost sounded like courage. "Don't get excited." "Impossible. I'm at school." Nia hated the flicker of warmth that line caused in her. "You shouldn't be here. Neither should the things that came through the fire." Her skin tightened. "That scream." "Yes." "What was it?" He studied her for a beat. "Hungry." "That is not an answer." "It is a warning." She glanced around. Students moved around them in rushing streams, unaware of how unreal this conversation was. "Who are you really?" "Here, I'm Red Veil." "Here?" He was silent. Her chest gave a strange, traitorous flutter, half fear, half anticipation. "That's not your real name?" she said softly. "No." "What is?" His gaze dropped briefly to her throat, to the place where the mark had burned awake. When he looked back up, something colder and older had settled into his face. "Rydian Ashthorn," he said, "heir of the Ash Court." The name slid through her like something ancient finding its place. She should have laughed. She should have walked away. Instead, the hallway tilted again, just slightly, and her breath snagged in her lungs. "That sounds made up." It would have been kinder if it were. The warning bell rang. Nia clutched her books tighter. "You're insane." I'm not. You expect me to believe you're some kind of... She lowered her voice. Prince? No. His expression was unreadable. I expect you to believe your own instincts. They're ahead of you. He stepped aside to let her pass. As she moved by, his fingers caught her sleeve. Just the brush of knuckles against knit fabric. Nothing more. Her whole body reacted. Heat swept under her skin in a violent rush. Her breath hitched. The mark beneath her collarbone flared once, hot and liquid, and for one impossible second she felt what he felt: hunger, restraint, a savage relief that tasted like smoke and iron. He let go at once. Nia stumbled back, staring. His jaw was tight now. You felt that? You did that? No. His voice roughened. We did. She fled into class shaking. At lunch, Sloane, accidentally, knocked Nia's tray hard enough to spill soup down the front of her cardigan. The cafeteria burst into the ugly laughter of people. Grateful humiliation belonged to someone else for a change. Nia froze, burning. Sloane pressed a hand to her chest in fake horror. Oh my God, Nia, you're so clumsy. For one wild second, Nia wanted to throw the entire tray in her face. Instead, she set it down with trembling hands and went to the bathroom, blinking hard until the hot pressure behind her eyes retreated. By the time she came back with paper towels pressed against her sweater, every decent table was full. She found an empty one near the back and sat alone. Her appetite was gone. Her dignity had gone with it. A shadow fell across the table. Rid dropped into the seat opposite her. The entire cafeteria seemed to notice at once. Nia went very still. Are you trying to get me killed? He glanced around. Is it that serious? Yes, she said urgently. It is exactly that serious. He turned his head toward Sloane's table across the room. The girls were already staring, rigid with disbelief. And Rid grinned at them. It was a terrible grin. Beautiful, mocking, deliberate. Ride, she hissed. Stop that. Why? He asked lazily. They like it. They do not like it, she said. Then this is an educational moment, he replied. You are a menace, she said. I've been called worse by better creatures. He leaned back in his chair, all dangerous ease, and every eye in the room seemed pulled toward them. Nia could practically feel Sloane's hatred sharpening from 20 feet away. She stood up so fast her chair scraped. Ride looked up at her. Leaving already? You are unbelievable, she said. So I'm told. She grabbed her bag. Enjoy the assassination attempt you just scheduled for me, and walked out before he could stop her. He caught up with her in the west stairwell. I misjudged that, he said. Nia spun. You think? His gaze flicked over her face. I was attempting retaliation. Against 17-year-old girls. They were cruel to you. That does not mean you get to go full dark overlord in the cafeteria. Not full, he said. You'd know. Despite everything, a startled laugh almost escaped her. She swallowed it down. His eyes narrowed as if he had heard it anyway. Then his expression changed. Subtle. Focused. What? She asked. He reached out slowly and touched the side of her neck. Nia jerked but not away. His fingers were warm. Too warm. They slid under the edge of her hair to the spot just below her ear. Her breath fractured. Every inch of space between them thickened. There, he murmured. What? You were followed. Before she could answer, the shadow behind them peeled itself off the wall. It had too many joints. Its body looked like smoke packed into the shape of a person and then forgotten halfway through. Eyes like cinders opened in the blur of its face. Nia made a sound she would deny forever. Ride shoved her behind him. Stay back, he said. The thing lunged. He moved faster. One moment, he was in front of her. The next, his hand was around the creature's throat, pinning it to the stairwell wall while black fire licked over his fingers. The potion hiding him flickered. For an instant, Nia saw the truth through the human shape. pointed ears, burning eyes, markings igniting beneath his skin. The creature shrieked. Ride smiled without warmth. You picked the wrong hallway. He crushed it. The thing broke apart into ash and sparks that hissed out before they hit the ground. Nia stared. He turned back to her, glamour settling over him again in wavering folds. That, he said, was a scout. Nia's pulse was trying to punch through her ribs. A scout for what? For the court faction that would prefer you dead before your birthday. Her mouth went dry. My birthday? You turn 18 in 12 days. How do you know that? His look was almost pitying. Nia, I know the night you were born. He took her behind the auditorium after school because he said it was less exposed, which was not comforting. The late light turned the brick wall amber. Wind scraped dead leaves over the pavement. Nia stood with her arms wrapped tight around herself and glared. Start at the beginning. The true beginning is inconveniently old. Try me. Ride watched her for a moment, as if recalculating. Your mother came to my court when you were an infant. Nia's stomach dropped. Her mother had died when Nia was 7. Everything left of her fit in a shoebox in Nia's closet. 2 photos, 1 scarf, a letter written when Nia was too young to remember it, and a silver charm that had always felt oddly warm to the touch. She knew about you? Nia said. Yes. She knew about this? She knew enough to be terrified. His eyes lowered briefly. You were dying, fever, not mortal fever. Something had crossed from my world into yours and marked you. She begged the ash court to save you. Nia's throat tightened. And you did. My father did, for a price. The ache in her chest returned, sharp and cold. Me. His silence was answer enough. She promised me a way. She traded a future she prayed you would never have to see for a life you would actually get to live. Nia took a step back. The air felt wrong, too thin, too bright, like reality had lost a supporting beam. No, she said. No, she wouldn't. She would if the alternative was watching you die in her arms. The image hit with horrible force. Nia as a baby, burning, her mother desperate enough to bargain with monsters. Why didn't she tell me? Because she hated herself for it. Nia closed her eyes. He let the silence stand a moment longer than kindness required. When she looked at him again, anger had rushed in to fill the crack grief made. So what now? You drag me to your creepy fire kingdom because my mother signed a magical contract before I could talk? Not drag. His tone was dry. Transport, if it becomes necessary. She made a strangled sound. That is not better. It wasn't intended to comfort. Nia stared at him. Do you even hear yourself? Constantly. It's exhausting. She huffed out a disbelieving breath. Unbelievable. Frequently. For one infuriating second, his mouth almost softened, and she caught herself noticing how unfair his face was up close, how his hair fell into his eyes, how the ember pendant rested against his throat, how warm he always seemed, like his body remembered flame even when he stood perfectly still. Nia looked away first. What does betrothed even mean to you? She asked. His gaze sharpened. It means you are under my protection. That wasn't my question. I know. She swallowed. Does it mean I'm property? No. Does it mean I have a choice? At that, he was silent long enough to chill her. That bad? She asked. It means the bond exists whether you approve of it or not, he said at last. Choice begins after that. That is a horrifying sentence. It is also true. Nia pressed a hand to her chest where the mark had flared. And if I say no? A flicker moved across his face, not anger, something heavier. Then I would still have to keep you alive. Why? Because if you die before the bond resolves, Several courts will go to war, and my father will likely turn your town into a memory." The words landed with the calmness of a blade set on a table. Nia stared at him in fresh disgust. "You say things like that as if I'm supposed to find you reassuring." "I'm not trying to reassure you." He paused. "I'm trying to prevent your death. The rest is decorative." She laughed once, sharp and joyless. "You are actually the worst. I've begun to suspect that's why you keep talking to me." She opened her mouth to throw something back. A yelp sounded from the parking lot. Nia turned. A tiny brown puppy had slipped its collar and darted into the street beyond the school fence. A delivery truck rolled toward the intersection too fast. "Oh my God!" Nia started forward. Ryde caught her elbow. "Don't." "But there's a dog." "Yes," he said. "It's going to get hit." "Probably," he said dryly. She jerked, staring at him. "Probably?" His expression did not change. "If you run into that road, you'll join it." Nia ripped her arm free and sprinted anyway. The truck horn blared. Tires screamed. Before she reached the fence, heat slashed past her. Ryde was suddenly there, one hand snatching the puppy by the scruff, the other braced against the truck's front grille. The metal groaned under his palm. The truck shuddered to a stop with smoke curling from the hood. The driver shouted in horror. Ryde handed the trembling puppy to a crying middle schooler on the sidewalk like he was returning a dropped pencil. Then he looked at Nia over the roof of the truck, expression flat. "You make terrible choices." Nia's pulse was all over the place. "You just said probably. I said what would keep you from moving. You manipulated me." "Yes," she gaped. "That is not noble. I'm Dark Fae, Nia. You keep expecting me to be house-trained." A laugh burst out of her before she could stop it. Real this time. Ryde went still, watching her with that unnerving intensity, as if laughter from her was rarer than blood magic. The warmth on her face had nothing to do with the autumn sun. Then an old woman with grocery bags reached the curb nearby, peering uncertainly at the traffic. Nia pointed at her. "Well, since you're apparently collecting acts of service now." Ryde glanced once. "She appears capable of crossing." "You're not going to help her?" "No." "You saved the puppy." "The puppy was in your line of sight." Nia stared at him. "That is so morally deranged." "I'm not moral according to you. You're not moral according to anyone." A beat passed. Then very faintly, amusement touched his mouth. "That feels overstated." She shook her head, half appalled, half helplessly fascinated. He had just stopped a truck with one hand and still somehow managed to make her want to strangle him. When she got home, Denise was in one of her cleaning moods and snapped at Nia for leaving shoes by the door. Her father barely looked up from the news. Nia ate dinner in silence, went upstairs early and pulled the shoebox from under her bed. Hands shaking, she opened it. The scarf, the photos, the old letter, and the silver charm. When she lifted it, heat sparked over her fingers. The charm cracked open like a seed. Inside was a folded slip of paper no larger than a matchbook. Nia unfolded it slowly. "If he has come, I have run out of time," the note said in her mother's handwriting. "Forgive me. I chose your life over your freedom, and I do not know if that makes me brave or unforgivable. The Ash Court saved you. The prince they bound you to was a child then, cruel-eyed and silent. But he looked at you as though you were not a burden. I hated him for that. I trusted him for it. If he comes for you, remember this. The dark are not always evil, and the beautiful are not always kind. Make him earn what was promised." Nia read the note 3 times. Then she sat on the floor with her back against the bed and cried so quietly no one downstairs would hear. The next few days rearranged her life with a kind of merciless efficiency. Ryde appeared everywhere. Outside class, at the end of the street after school, across the library from her, pretending to read a government textbook while he watched reflections in the window. Once, shockingly, in the produce aisle while Denise compared avocados. "How are you here?" Nia hissed. He glanced at the canned tomatoes. "I walked." "That's not what I meant." "I know." Denise looked between them, suddenly transformed from irritated to interested. "Nia, who is this?" Before Nia could answer, Ride held out a hand with aristocratic ease. "Ride Vale, ma'am." Denise stared, a little dazzled despite herself. "Oh, well, you're very..." "Suspicious?" Nia supplied. "Polite," Denise said. Ride's gaze flicked to Nia. A common misunderstanding. At school, his attention made everything worse and better at once. Boys stopped making jokes when he was nearby. Girls stared harder. Sloane's cruelty sharpened into something cleaner and more dangerous: social precision. Notes left on Nia's desk. A photo of Ride looking at her posted with a caption about desperate charity cases. Whispered comments meant to slice only where they'd land. It worked more than Nia wanted to admit. Being singled out by someone like him did not magically heal years of being made to feel small. It just made the smallness more visible. One afternoon, Sloane cornered her by the bathrooms. "So, what are you, his charity project?" Sloane asked. Nia kept her voice even. "You should ask him. He seems very invested in ignoring you." Sloane's eyes flashed. "Careful." "With what?" "With thinking this changes anything." Nia's heart pounded, but she met her stare. "Maybe it doesn't, but you clearly wish it did." Sloane stepped closer. The hallway lights flickered. A heat wave rolled through the corridor so sudden that everyone looked up. Ride stood at the far end near the stairwell, not moving. Sloane went pale and stepped back first. Nia hated herself for the vicious satisfaction that gave her. Later, in the library stacks, she found him leaning one shoulder against a shelf. "You can't do that," she whispered. "Do what?" "Threaten people with your aura or your weird heat demon thing." He considered. "It was extremely mild." "You are impossible," she said. "And yet you continue seeking me out in libraries," he replied. "I did not seek you out. You manifest." A shadow of humor crossed his face. "Better." She hugged a book to her chest. "I read my mother's note." He went still. "She said you were a child when she met you." "I was." "She said you had cruel eyes." "That also sounds accurate." "She said you looked at me like I wasn't a burden." Something changed in his expression then. The library, the shelves, the dusty quiet all seemed to thin around it. "I remember that night," he said. His voice was lower than usual, stripped of irony. Nia's pulse stumbled. "What did I look like?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Small," he said. "Angry." "I was a baby. You were fighting the fever." She stared. A slow, strange ache moved through her. Grief and comfort tangled together. Someone remembered her from before she remembered herself. Someone impossible. Ride stepped closer. Too close. "You smelled like rain," he said, as if this were evidence in some private argument he had never stopped having. "You stopped crying when I touched your hand." Nia forgot to breathe. The mark at her collarbone burned warm. His gaze dropped to her mouth. Everything in her body sharpened at once. She should move, she knew that. Instead, she stood there in the hush between shelves while heat climbed her skin and his eyes darkened into something far less human than gray. "Nia," he said softly. It was not the way boys at school said her name. It was not casual or hopeful or playful. It sounded claimed, reverent, and dangerous at once. She took a step back so suddenly she hit the shelf. Books shifted above her head. Ride looked away first, jaw hard. Cold descended over him like armor. "There are 3 more scouts in town," he said flatly. Nia blinked. That is a brutal conversation change. It was necessary. For who? His eyes came back to hers, unreadable now. "Both of us." That night she dreamed of him again. Not the boy in the leather jacket, the prince. Radian Ashthorn stood in a hall of black stone and silver flame, dressed in dark ceremonial armor traced with ember lines. Ash drifted around him like snow. Behind him rose wings, vast, burning, impossible, made of fire threading through shadow and black feathers smoking at the edges. He turned, and the dream body version of Nia felt the force of recognition so intensely it hurt. When she woke, her pillow was damp and her chest was glowing. Her 18th birthday was 3 days away when the glamour failed in public. It happened during 6th period. Mr. Colby was lecturing badly about industrialization. The class was half asleep. Rain clicked against the windows. Nia sensed Ride before she looked at him, though he sat all the way across the room. That had started 2 days ago, the unsettling ability to feel when his attention shifted onto her, like heat against the back of her neck. Then Sloane, seated behind Naya, flicked a folded note against her shoulder. Naya ignored it. Another hit her ear. She opened the second one despite herself. Still thinks he'd choose you if he saw you properly? The sting was stupid and immediate. Her throat tightened. Across the room, Ride went motionless. The windows rattled. Mr. Colby frowned. Did somebody open? The lights cut out. Gasps rustled through the class. Then a crack of thunder shook the glass, though the sky had been almost clear seconds earlier. Nia turned. Ride was staring at Sloane. His eyes were burning. Not subtly, not maybe. Burning. A black gold sigil flashed up one side of his throat. The tips of his ears sharpened visibly through his hair. A girl near him screamed. The room exploded into chaos. Ride was on his feet in one fluid motion, face hard, with a rage so controlled it was worse than shouting. Nia felt it through the bond like the front edge of a wildfire. "Don't," she said. She didn't even know if he heard her. Sloane stumbled back from her desk, white-faced. "What is wrong with him?" "A lot," Nia almost said. Instead, she moved. She crossed the room, seized Ride's wrist, and the second she touched him, the world lurched. Heat surged. Sound dropped away. The mark on her chest blazed so bright she saw it through fabric. His head snapped toward her. For one breathless second, the whole class seemed to vanish. "Nia," he said, voice not entirely human. "Come with me." She replied. That terrible intensity held another second. Then, with visible effort, he let her drag him out. They made it to the unused music room before he tore free and turned away, breathing hard. The glamour was still failing. His ears had elongated fully now. Ember light pulsed under the skin at his throat and hands. Dark ash drifted from his shoulders like smoke from a banked fire. Nia shut the door and stared. "You almost revealed yourself to 30 people. They hurt you." They passed a note. "Yes." She threw up a hand. "Do you hear how that sounds? Do you hear how your heart changed when you read it?" Her mouth closed. He turned then, all dangerous beauty and fraying control. "I felt it," he said. "The shame, the hurt. I was trying not to." Nia's breath caught. The bond. He could feel her. The knowledge was intimate in a way she was nowhere near ready for. His gaze dragged over her face. "This is getting worse." "For me too," she whispered. That seemed to affect him more than it should have. His eyes lowered for one flicker of a second, then rose again, darker. "Show me," he said. "What?" "The mark." Her pulse jumped straight into her throat. "Absolutely not." "Nia, no. If it has spread, I need to know." She swallowed. His voice had gone low enough to stroke against her nerves. "You cannot just ask girls things like that." "I can, when their lives are tied to ancient death magic." "That is not flirting your way out of this." A faint flash of teeth. "You think I'm flirting?" Her whole body betrayed her with a violent rush of heat. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Something predatory softened into fascination in his expression. "Interesting. Don't do that either," she said. "Do what?" "Look at me like you've discovered a private hobby." He took one step closer. "You're trembling." "I hate you," she said. "No, you don't." The room shrank. Every nerve in her body knew exactly how close he was, how warm, how dangerous, how unfairly beautiful. The air between them felt charged, as if one more step would make something irreversible happen. Then he reached past her shoulder and opened the classroom window. Cold rain air rushed in. Naya blinked. He looked almost bored. "There, you seem overheated." She stared at him in disbelief. He was doing it on purpose now. Hot one moment, glacial the next. "You are a terrible person," she said. "I've noticed your standards are ambitious," he replied. A sound like a bell ringing underwater slid through the room. Ryde's face changed instantly. "Too late," he said. The window glass blew inward. 3 creatures poured through in a rush of shadow and claws. Nia screamed. Ryde moved. Black fire ripped from his hands. One creature struck the wall already burning. Another he met in midair, driving it to the floor so hard the tiles cracked. The third lunged at Nia. She threw up her arms. A shield of ember light burst around her. The creature hit it and shrieked. Nia stared in shock at the fire-curved barrier around her body. Ryde looked at her once, sharply, almost proudly, even in the middle of killing things. Then his glamour shattered completely. Wings unfurled from his back in a storm of ash. Nia stopped breathing. They were enormous. Black feathered at the structure, but every feather edge burned with orange-red fire, as if they had been forged from cinder and night. Ash drifted from them in glowing flakes. The room could not contain them, and yet somehow did. Ridian Ashthorn looked nothing like a boy then. He looked like disaster with a pulse. One creature saw the wings and tried to flee. He caught it, wrapped in fire, and destroyed it. Silence dropped. Only the rain remained, ticking through the broken window. Nia stood inside the fading shield and stared at him, chest heaving. His wings folded slowly behind him, the fire along them dimming to ember lines. "This," he said, voice roughened with battle and something like resignation, "is why I preferred the jacket." After the music room attack, school was over in every sense that mattered. The administration called it an electrical event and sent everyone home early. Briar Glen High had developed a bizarre institutional commitment to not processing supernatural incidents. Ryde took Nia to the old cemetery behind St. Agnes because, as he put it, the dead are better behaved than the living. She was too rattled to argue. Rain dampened the grass. Marble angels stared blindly through the mist. Nia stood beneath a cedar tree trying to absorb the fact that wings were now part of her life. He stood a few feet away, glamour restored enough to pass if you were a fool. "I need honesty," she said. "I've been unpleasantly honest from the beginning." "More of it," she said. His mouth twitched. "How brave of you." She pointed at him. "That. Stop that." He actually looked chastened for half a second. Then the fog thickened. A woman stepped out of it wearing a gown black as wet ink. She was beautiful in the way storms were beautiful, elegant, distant, and not meant for tenderness. Her silver white hair hung in a braid down one shoulder. Her eyes were dark fire. Ryde immediately moved in front of Naya. The woman arched a brow. "You hide her as if I'd snatch her from your hands, Prince. You would if it served you, Lady Sereth." Nia peeked around his shoulder. "I hate to interrupt whatever this is, but I would love context." Lady Sereth's gaze slid to her, not unkind, not kind either, appraising. "So this is the mortal." "Try not to sound disappointed," Nia muttered. One corner of Sereth's mouth lifted. "She has teeth." Ryde did not relax. "Why are you here?" "To tell you your father has lost patience." Her gaze sharpened. The Crimson Betrothal woke in front of witnesses. Several courts know by now. The Hollow Court already sent hounds. By tomorrow, they will send nobility. Nia's blood ran cold. "For me? For what binding you represent, Sareth said. A mortal carrying Royal Ashcourt bonfire is not merely scandalous, it is leverage. Ride's voice was flat. I'm taking her through tonight. Nia's head snapped toward him. You are what? Lady Sareth looked amused. She doesn't know. Know what? Nia demanded. That once the mark reaches your throat, Sareth said, the human world will stop tolerating you. Nia touched her collarbone instinctively. Meaning? Meaning doors weaken around you. Creatures smell you. Magic will answer you whether you understand it or not. Mortals around you may begin to burn, sicken, or dream badly. Nia's stomach twisted. You're saying I'm dangerous? Ride's answer was immediate. No, I'm saying this world is becoming dangerous to you. The difference should not have mattered. It did. Sareth watched that land and nodded to herself like someone confirming a theory. He has chosen his side faster than expected. Ride's eyes hardened. Leave. She ignored him and addressed Nia. He was not the only possible groom, you know. Ride turned, lethal in an instant. Sareth smiled faintly. There, that expression. That's why I approved the match. You approved, Nia began. Your mother begged before the ash throne, Sareth said. Your prince was young and arrogant and absolutely infuriating. He insisted the child should live. He offered his own future binding to secure it. Nia stared at Ride. He did not look at her. He didn't tell you that? Sareth asked lightly. How romantic of him. Enough, Ride snapped. Sareth's gown rustled as she stepped back into the fog. Take her before midnight, Ashthorn. The next visitors won't bother with conversation. Then she was gone. The cemetery felt colder without her. Nia looked at Ride. Really looked. You volunteered? His jaw flexed. I was 12. That isn't an answer. It was debt law. The court would save a life only under binding. You offered yourself. I offered a future obligation. I expected never to collect it. She took that in, piece by piece. Then why come now? At last, he met her gaze. Because when reports of your approaching 18th year reached court, I went to verify the bond and decide whether to dissolve it if possible. Her throat tightened. And then I saw you. The answer went through her like a strike of heat. The rain, the graves, the mist, all of it fell away for a second beneath the force of what he did not quite say and what she understood anyway. You intended to reject me, she whispered. Yes. And then you didn't. No? Why? His eyes were ember dark now, stripped of mockery. You really don't know. The mark at her chest flared. Nia looked away first because if she didn't, she might do something reckless and memorable in a cemetery. Ride stepped closer, not touching her. I did not come seeking love, he said quietly. I came seeking clarity. What I found was intolerable. Nia swallowed. That is a terrible confession. I wasn't raised for tenderness. No, I'm starting to notice. A beat passed. Then his hand lifted, slow enough for her to stop him. She didn't. His knuckles brushed her cheek. The contact was almost nothing. It wrecked her. Heat unspooled under her skin. Her breath left her in a broken thread. Every lonely part of her that had learned to expect neglect reacted with awful, aching hunger to the simple fact of being touched carefully. His expression changed when he felt that. Gentled, darkened, claimed. Then he pulled back, cold again. We leave tonight, he said. Nia nearly laughed from sheer exasperation. You cannot keep doing that. Doing what? Becoming the center of my nervous system and then acting like we're discussing weather. His mouth curved slowly. I can try to become less memorable. That was not the lesson. She did not go willingly. She did go. There was a difference, and Nia repeated it to herself all the way back home while shoving clothes into a duffel bag with shaking hands. Her father was working late. Denise was at spin class. The house felt as empty as it usually did, which somehow hurt more now that leaving had become real. She wrote a note she hated. "I'm safe. Don't panic. I need time. I'm sorry." It looked ridiculous on the kitchen counter beside the fruit bowl. In her bedroom, she paused over the shoebox one last time, tucked her mother's note into her jacket, and went downstairs. Ride was waiting outside under the dead maple tree. Streetlights silvered his face. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "You came back," she said. He looked offended. Obviously. Nia clutched the duffel tighter. Still not a comforting man. "I'm not aiming for comfort. I know. You've made that weirdly clear." He took the bag from her without asking. The small, practical gesture nearly undid her. He noticed that too. He noticed everything. They made it only 3 blocks before the night split open. The alley ahead filled with pale blue fire. A carriage of bone-white branches emerged from it, drawn by 2 creatures shaped like horses if horses had been invented by nightmares. 3 figures stepped down in silver armor and veils of frost. The hollow court. Ride shoved Nia behind him. "Stay back." "You keep saying that as if I've ever done the smart thing once." An honest self-assessment. We're making progress. The lead figure lowered her veil. She had a lovely face and dead eyes. "Prince Radian," she said, "yield the mortal bride. Your claim has been contested." "She isn't a parcel," Nia snapped before terror could stop her. All 3 nobles looked at her. Ride muttered, "Incredible. You found a worse moment." The lead noble smiled thinly. "It speaks," Nia bristled. "I'm right here." "Yes," the woman said, briefly. The streetlights burst. Darkness swallowed the block. Ride's wings slammed open in a blaze of fire and ash. The hollow court moved first. Ice spears screamed through the dark. Ride cut them apart with black flame, heat surging so fiercely it drove Nia back against a brick wall. The mark over her heart blazed in answer. Every strike he took echoed through her body as pressure and heat, every burst of his rage like standing too close to a furnace door. One noble came for her. Instinct ripped through Nia before thought. She flung up a hand. Fire answered. Not Ride's fire, hers. A ring of red gold flame exploded outward, throwing the noble back into the alley wall hard enough to crack stone. Nia stared at her own hand in horror. "Well," Ride said over the sound of battle, "that's new, you think? Try not to incinerate yourself. It complicates the evening." He drove one attacker into the pavement. Ash and frost tore through the alley in violent swirls. The remaining noble lifted a blade of white ice and aimed it at Ride's exposed back. Nia didn't think. She ran. The blade meant for him buried itself in her shoulder. Pain detonated through her body. She hit the ground with a cry. Everything stopped. Ride turned. Nia would remember that expression for the rest of her life. Not fear, not exactly, ruin. The alley darkened as if night itself had bowed to his anger. Fire roared up his wings. Every ember line across his skin lit at once. The hollow noble actually stepped back. "Run," she whispered to the others. Too late. Radian Ashthorn moved like judgment. When it was over, the alley smelled of melted frost and smoke. The bone-white carriage burned blue at the edges. Ride was on his knees beside Nia before the last cinders died. His hands hovered over her shoulder, burning and careful. "Why would you do that?" She laughed weakly through the pain. "You really pick strange moments to ask obvious questions." His face was white with fury, or fear, maybe both. "You could have died." "Yes. And then several courts go to war. Your father destroys my town. Very inconvenient for everyone." His eyes flashed. "This is not the time for your humor." "Then stop saying things that set it up." His mouth tightened, but something in his face broke open too. The cold control, the distance, the princely restraint, gone. His hand pressed lightly over the wound. Heat flooded in. Nia arched with a gasp as the ice in her shoulder dissolved to steam. The pain was terrible, then less terrible, then only a shaking ache. Their faces were inches apart. "You bled for me," he said, voice raw. "Apparently, badly. Do not make it weird." "I'm dark fae, Nia. Weird is our textile industry." A startled laugh broke out of her even then. His gaze dropped to her mouth. "Nia," he said, and this time her name sounded like surrender. The alley vanished. There was only heat, pain, smoke, and the look on his face. "Kiss me," she whispered. He made a sound low in his throat, almost disbelieving. "You do not understand what you ask." "Then tell me later." That wrecked the last of him. He kissed her like a man who had been holding back a storm with his bare hands. Hot, deep, devastating. His mouth was heat and hunger and restraint breaking all at once. Her fingers caught in his jacket, then in the base of one burning wing. He made a rough sound against her lips and pulled her closer with a hand at her waist, as if he had wanted this for longer than he'd meant to survive. The bond ignited. Nia felt it pour through her body, his protectiveness, his fury, his want, his ancient loneliness. Her own answering rush cracked open with it. Fear, longing, astonishment, the terrible sweetness of being chosen so completely it felt like annihilation. When he drew back, both of them were breathing hard. The mark had climbed to the base of her throat, blazing red gold. Ride touched it once with his fingertips. "It's done," he said quietly. Nia swallowed. "What's done?" "The bond is sealed." She stared at him. "You could have led with that before the kissing." "I was occupied." "That is not an excuse." "It is an excellent one." She laughed shakily, then winced. His face sharpened again. "We still have to go." Nia looked at the wrecked alley, the dead frost, the black fire, at her own hand, still warm with magic. Then up at him, at the prince in the borrowed human shape, at the boy who had sat across from her in the cafeteria just to make cruel girls furious, at the infuriating creature who would save a puppy because she was looking and ignore an old lady because he didn't care, at the dangerous, arrogant, morally troubling, devastatingly attentive male who had not come for love and found himself trapped in it anyway. Her whole life, she had been the one people could leave behind. She understood, suddenly, with startling clarity, that whatever came next, he would not leave her. The realization was not safety exactly, but it was something stronger. It was choice. Nia pushed herself carefully to her feet. "Fine." His brows lifted. "Fine? I'm coming with you." Just for a second, real surprise crossed his face. Then it gentled into something so fierce and private it tightened her chest. "You're certain?" "No," she said honestly, "but I'm done letting everyone else decide what happens to me." A slow smile touched his mouth, not mocking this time, proud. "That," he murmured, "sounds like my betrothed. Do not ruin this moment." No promises. He held out his hand. This time, Nia took it. The doorway between worlds opened in the old rail tunnel outside town. Ride drew a line of fire across rusted stone. The air split down the middle. Beyond it lay a forest of black trees, under a silver moon, too large to be real. The Ash Court. Crossing felt like stepping through cold water and into heat at once. Nia's ears rang. Her wound vanished. The mark at her throat settled into a deep pulse rather than a burn. The world on the other side smelled like smoke, pine resin, iron, and night-blooming flowers. Ride watched her closely as she took it in. "Well?" he asked. "Well," Nia said faintly. "You've somehow made actual reality feel under-designed." That earned the softest huff of amusement. The road to his court was carved through obsidian woods, lit by ember lanterns. Strange creatures watched from the trees. Once, something winged and white crossed the moon high above them and vanished. By dawn, they stood before the Ash Court itself. It rose from the mountainside like a palace built out of cooled wildfire, black stone, glowing veins of ember, Towers like carved thorns, bridges of dark metal stretched over rivers of mist, banners hung in deep crimson and ash gray. It should have terrified her. It did. It also moved something in her she couldn't name, as if the bond had been right about one thing from the start. Some sleeping part of her recognized this place. Inside, nobles filled the throne hall in layered dark silks and armor. Some had antlers. Some had eyes like molten copper. Some looked almost human until they smiled. At the far end sat the Ash King. He was terrible in the way old fire is terrible, contained, patient, and ruinously powerful. Beside him stood Lady Sareth with her unreadable face. Ride stepped forward, wings gone, glamour abandoned. Only his true self remained. Nia stayed at his side. A murmur passed through the court at that. Not because she was there, because she was there beside him. The king's gaze fixed on her throat, on the sealed mark. "So," he said, voice deep as distant thunder, "the mortal chose." Nia lifted her chin, though every instinct told her not to. "I did." The king's gaze shifted to his son. "And you?" Ride didn't hesitate. "I claim what was promised, but not as debt, as bond." The court went silent. Lady Sareth smiled very slightly. The king's face revealed nothing. A dangerous distinction. "Yes," Ride said. The king looked at Nia again. "Mortal girl, do you know what you stand within?" Nia thought of Briar Glen's fluorescent hallways, of Sloane's sneer, of Denise's indifference, of the note from her mother, of the alley, the fire, the kiss, the choice. "No," she said truthfully. "But I know what I walked away from." The answer seemed to matter. The king leaned back against the obsidian throne. "Then let the court hear it. The crimson betrothal stands. Any challenge against the bride is challenge against the ash heir directly." Around the hall, tension shifted. Not gone, recalculated. Ride's hand brushed the small of Nia's back, grounding and possessive at once. The king's mouth edged towards something not unlike approval. "Try not to burn down my kingdom over her, son." Ride's expression was perfectly neutral. "No promises." Nia looked at him sideways. "That line is becoming a problem. It's efficient." The audience ended in a sweep of velvet, steel, and staring eyes. When the hall emptied, Lady Sareth approached. She studied Nia a long moment. "You were kinder than I expected." Nia blinked. "That sounds like an insult wearing jewelry." Sareth's lips quirked. "You'll do." Then she turned to Ride. "Her rooms are prepared." Ride said, "She stays in mine." Sareth's brows rose. Nia choked. "I'm sorry?" Ride glanced down at her, maddeningly calm. "It's safest." "For who?" "For everyone trying to get near you." Sareth looked delighted. Nia pointed a finger at him. "Absolutely not without a conversation." "A long one?" he asked. "A very long one." His gaze dipped, heat flaring briefly. "That has possibilities." Nia stared at him. "See? Too hot. Then you'll turn into an iceberg 5 minutes later." "I've never been ice." "No, just emotionally inconvenient." Something warm, almost helplessly fond, crossed his face. And in that instant, she saw it clearly. For all his control, for all his arrogance, for all the dark court power wrapped around him like another skin, he had fallen first. Harder, too. The knowledge settled into her with a quiet strength. Not because it made her safe from him, because it meant he could be asked to earn what her mother had promised. Nia stepped closer until only a breath of space remained between them. Ride's eyes darkened immediately. "You are going to explain everything," she said, "including bond law, court politics, why you thought cafeteria warfare was a good idea, and what exactly happens if you keep looking at me like that." His voice lowered. "You'll need to be more specific." She rolled her eyes, though heat climbed her face. "And then, maybe I'll consider not hating you." "Maybe." "I'm still deciding." A slow, dangerous smile unfolded. "Take your time," Rudian Ashthorne said. I've been waiting longer than you know." And this time, when he offered her his hand in the burning heart of his dark and impossible world, Nia knew enough to understand that taking it would not end the story.